naar het Engels. AJ, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. So first and foremost, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you're dialing in from. Obviously, we're running this webinar in English. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm from the UK, and I can guarantee that all of your English will be far better than my Dutch. So thank you for taking this webinar in English. As mentioned, we're going to go through not just TripWires, but a whole host of new features and functionality today. I think it was a good time, and the fact that we were able to get everybody on the call to actually go through a product update and kind of run through everything that's new in the world of Horizon 3 and what's been released over the last, say, 4 months or so. By way of quick introduction, for those of you that aren't familiar with myself, so my name is AJ Nurkham. I'm the Senior Systems Engineer at Horizon 3 for North Europe. And what I'm going to go through, as I mentioned before, is the new kind of features and functionality from us at Horizon 3 and what's in the NodeZero product, and potentially what we might be coming up in the near future as well. So if I just share my screen with you. Wonderful. Just a quick recap. So not all of you will be familiar with the Horizon 3 NodeZero platform. What I want to talk you through is first and foremost our philosophy, and a lot of you will be familiar with this, is the fact that you already use the product in anger. So as you can see here, our philosophy is that we want to use offensive cyber to inform defensive cyber strategies. And this philosophy is really what runs through all aspects of our product to date, and also the way that we shape our product moving forward. And you'll see this when we talk about the likes of rapid response, TripWires, and insights in the coming demo. The goal here ultimately is to, as it says, go hack yourself, because ultimately it's safer to be compromised in a meaningful way with a product that you are aware of than actually to go through a breach yourself. And we'll actually talk through some of the design functions that we thought about in some of the new features using that same ethos. What I want to do is just give you, again, a quick 5 minutes or so around the background of the company. Now, most of you will be familiar with the fact that we are born and designed originally out of JSOC, which is the Joint Special Operations. And again, most of you will be familiar with our two co-founders, Snehal Antony, our CEO, previously CTO at Splunk, CTO and really only 2-star civilian general at JSOC, and CIO at GE Capital, and also our original founding automation engineer, Tony P. Now, the reason why I wanted to show this slide is that many people talk about our founders, but what a lot of people always rarely talk about is the other founding team. Now, we have a whole host of other founding team members, traditionally known as our exploit team or our attack team, now more traditionally known as our research and labs team. And that's important, and one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight that is they have a whole set of roles and responsibilities. To date, they are responsible for maintaining the back end of our product and keeping all of our attack content up to date. But they're also, one of their primary drivers is to maintain our rapid response product. So those founding engineers are, again, all ex-JSOC, and they are of offensive cyber backgrounds. So traditionally 3-letter agency style offensive cyber analysts, and you'll see kind of how that shows through in the rapid response service when we jump into the demo in a moment's time. Now, the mission of our founders, as well as our founding team and everyone here at Horizon 3, is to proactively find and fix the issues within the organization. Now, there is something to be aware of between the finding and the fixing, which is change control process. And that time between finding and fixing can be a very sensitive time. And I'll talk about that at detail when we talk about our TripWires product. So TripWires is our early investment into our deception and detection capabilities. And it's really there to provide protection to you as an organization between finding the issues and being able to actively fix those issues. And that will all become more apparent as we run through the demo in a moment. So again, to go back to the team, the team is primarily veteran-based, so of that offensive cyber background, primarily from a history of protecting nation-state level, and you'll see that shine through when we discuss the rapid response product in detail. One thing I wanted to talk about, and again, you'll all be familiar, is that we are architected in a SaaS-based model. This is one of the reasons why we developed the Rapid Response Center. The Rapid Response Center is our zero-day and end-day protection service. Because of our architecture and being built in the cloud, it gives us an advantage and gives us an advantage to provide to you as organizations to get very quick insights on emerging zero-day and end-day threats as they start to appear in the wild. As we go through the Rapid Response Center, you'll see that we are able to push out very quickly tests that you can use to get a good understanding and picture of your organization, and one, whether you have those critical zero-day vulnerabilities in your environment. Two, whether the attack chains are in place to get to those vulnerabilities. And three, are you actively exploitable? It's a way of using offensive cyber to be more proactive in your approach to protection, especially against these celebrity-style vulnerabilities that kind of hit the news and can appear online in the wild. The other benefit of being SaaS-based is that we're also able to retain pen test data, specifically metadata, for long periods of time. And that retention period has allowed us to invest and create a new product known as Insights. Now, Insights is our entry into governance, risk, and compliance. Again, most of you will be familiar to date of all of the type of information you're able to pull out of a running or finalized pen test. At the end of the day, a pen test is really just a point in time, and what we're wanting to move to is more continuous security validation. Because of our way that we architect the cloud, we can then compare pen test data over very long periods of time. So you can now start to track risk and weaknesses, and in essence, trend analysis of how your organization is responding to offensive cyber techniques. And again, all of this will become a lot more apparent as we go through the demo itself. One final slide from me before we jump into the demo is just to talk about how the product works from a discovery standpoint. So you'll hear terms, and you will have been familiar with terms like autonomous pen testing, autonomous red teaming, security validation, CTEM. But really what this boils down to at Horizon 3 is the picture that you see on screen here. This is the fundamental engine of the product. So just to do a quick recap of actually how the product works, because this will again provide a lot of context to when we go through these new feature updates in the demo. So again, the Horizon 3 engine is designed to act like an advanced persistent threat. Now you'll notice in our name, Horizon3.ai. Funny story. When we were first incorporated in 2019, some of you will be familiar with the fact that there is also a game known as Horizon 3, and they owned the .com domain at the time. So we are actually unable to get that .com domain, so we bought the AI domain, and it's stuck ever since. We obviously own the .com domain now. Now the .ai has stuck. But to provide some kind of visibility into what we do, we're not actually running generative AI in our product. We're running a set of machine learning algorithms that are designed to mimic and act exactly like a threat actor. Once we can understand how your environment responds to threats, we can then start to pull insights, deploy deception technology, and get a really good understanding of what a breach could potentially look like without having to go through that obviously highly anxiety-provoking period of suffering a true breach. So how does the product actively work when you're running it in your environment? First, and you'll see this as we look at the configuration, you will fuel the product with open source intelligence. Open source intelligence allows us to do a lot of reconnaissance. It allows us to go out and check breach databases and do DNS lookups. It allows us to scrape social media for current and previous employees and really find out what information is publicly available about your organization online. Now, once we have that reconnaissance information, that fuels our machine learning algorithms to go out into your organization and pen test. And what it will do is it will enumerate, like a threat actor. It takes no assumption as what your organization or your environment looks like, and it will start to scan and enumerate to understand hosts and services and how it can move throughout throughout your environment. Once it's got to that point and it understands the environment, it will then make a set of informed choices of what are the first actions that it can take. Some of you may be familiar with Deep Blue, the supercomputer, the first supercomputer from IBM that was able to beat a grandmaster at chess. IBM didn't hard code every single chess piece or chess move to beat the grandmaster. What it did was take next best actions based on the moves being played. And that's in essence exactly how our product works. It's what's referred to as a Markov decision-making engine. So once we understand the environment and we know what are the first moves to play, that is the picture that you see on screen in front of you. This is what's known as a cyber terrain map, and this is the picture that we build up within the product. From that cyber terrain map, we're able to then move throughout the environment and ultimately get to our end goal, which is to safely compromise your environment. Now, during that process, we now have the ability to drop deception and detection tokens. And this will become more apparent again as we go through the demo itself. Once we have that cyber terrain map, we're also able then to collect, as mentioned before, data over time to provide insights and trend analysis rather than just that point in time map of your environment or map of the weaknesses that are there. So that's just a quick background, again, to the company. Most of you will be familiar with that. I just wanted to do a slightly deeper dive into actually how the product works. And now what we'll do is we'll go through a demo of the platform and run through those new features and functionality that's been released in the product over the last few months or so. So most of you will be familiar with the portal. Once we log into the portal, some of you may or may not see some new tabs that have appeared across the top here. These are the topics that we're going to talk about today. Firstly, rapid response. Rapid response is our, mentioned before, 0-day and end-day protection service. This is to allow you to get a very quick and immediate understanding of whether you are vulnerable to very critical and emergent threats as they appear in the wild. Secondly, TripWires, which is our deception and detection technology, a way to be able to protect you and get an early warning understanding of whether there is someone already in your environment. And finally, insights, which is that governance, risk, and compliance reporting. Moving away from that point in time pen test view to more long-term strategic and long-term trend analysis that you can then use to report to management and report to the board. So the first thing I'd like to do is just quickly jump into running a new pen test. If we click on just a typical internal pen test, how you would typically set up a normal infrastructure attack surface within Horizon 3. With the enablement of TripWires, you'll then see this option occur within the pen test configuration. It's very, very straightforward to actually deploy TripWires within the environment. Now, I want to give you a bit of a background and a use case as to actually why we developed this product. So I mentioned a moment ago that there is a very delicate time in that find, fix, verify cycle where you as maybe a CISO or a security management can be incredibly vulnerable when understanding your environment from an offensive cyber perspective. So we were working with an incredibly large organization. They've been using our product for about 12 months or so. And they were going through that typical process of running pen tests in their cloud, on premise, in their demilitarized zone, and really getting a good picture and understanding of where their risks, where their impacts and their weaknesses lied. The biggest issue with that organization, though, was between actually finding the issues and fixing the issues, there was a lot of change control process. Change control means that you have to potentially wait for a change control board or meeting. There could be numerous teams involved, like server teams, infrastructure teams, desktop teams, that also are required to bring it to be brought in to make those fixes. And their actual window between, or their mean time to remediation, was between 3 and 6 months. Now, during that time, using Horizon 3, we were explaining through the product that they were subject to, in this specific case, ransomware attacks, sensitive data exposure and ransomware attacks. Now, during the life cycle of using that product, they actually suffered a true breach, and they were ransomwared by a ransomware group. Now, I don't know if any of you on the call have ever been through a breach. I have. It's highly unpleasant. There is only one thing worse than going through a breach, and that is going through a breach and then during the instant response process, realizing that you were breached in exactly the same way that your tooling had been telling you for 12 months prior. And that was really the big issue that came from security management and the CISO, was they suffered a breach through a true threat actor, and that occurred in exactly the same way that we were reporting. So we thought at Horizon 3, what is the way that we can try and limit the blast radius and protect organizations between finding the problems and actively being able to fix them? And that's why we implemented this TripWire product. What this will do is, as you run an active pen test throughout your environment, we're able to drop highly defined deception tokens, known as canary tokens, in behind a running pen test. You can see 3 of them as an example on screen, and we're always adding more into the product. But in certain use cases, we can drop in AWS credentials files, MySQL dump files, or monitor suspicious processes within Windows to say, if there is someone already in the environment, and if you're doing zero trust, you assume breach, this is not us running a pen test that is there and doing these active processes. There is someone else there, and you have someone within your environment. So it's using offensive cyber to be able to strategically drop early warning deception tokens in behind our tests to try and keep you covered, to one, understand where someone may potentially be within your organization, and what are the likely attack chains they are going to move down, and therefore what are the likely outcomes that can happen if left unattended. So to configure it, very, very straightforward. You just select drop all tripwires as part of your typical pen test configuration or template, and that's all you need to do. Once you've done that, in the outcomes, you'll then start to see, as you run additional pen tests, tokens being dropped. So you'll see here 3 tripwires being dropped in different locations based on what weaknesses and exploitability that we can find. Moving into the actual tripwires tab itself, if you don't have tripwires enabled, we'll also be able to show you potential scenarios based on your previous pen test data as to where you could actively drop those tripwires if necessary. We'll show you the opportunities over time as you're running scheduled pen tests, and also the number of tripwires and the types of tripwires that have been or could be potentially deployed. Now, once those tripwires have been deployed, you can start to manage them. You get a list of where they're deployed. You can see the different types of tripwires we have deployed. And we'll show you the location, maybe what operating system they're dropped on. You can test those tripwires to make sure they're enabled. And then also any manual deletion instructions if you need to remove them after the fact. You can also pivot into the exact attack paths. So if one of these alerts is triggered, and I'll show you the alerting in a moment, you then have the ability to understand where that person is, where that threat actor is within your organization, and what are those attack chains that they can go down, as I mentioned previously. Pivoting into the alerts, alerts can be generated and provided into two different systems. They can be provided into this portal, or via webhooks, we can provide integration into your SOC services or your SIM solution. So if you're wanting to get more additional detection capabilities into third-party systems, that's all available to be configured through the settings tab at the top here. So you don't have to have multiple panes of glass. From a detection perspective, you can add all of this into those third-party services as necessary. So this is what an alert would look like. Again, we give you a date and time of when they were tripped, the IP address, relative location information, the trip action, again, those related trip paths and where those files have actually been triggered. You can obviously then mark these as red as they've been resolved. Now, as I mentioned, we're adding many different TripWires into the product over the coming months. But the key thing here, from a deception technology perspective, is to provide you that proactive approach to understanding how people are in the environment by using offensive cyber techniques. With that, I'll pause for any questions before we move into the next part of the product. Is there any questions in the chat? I don't believe so.
No, not yet.
No, okay, perfect. Again, any questions as we go through, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm happy to answer them as we go through. The next thing I want to talk about is outside of this.
AJ.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I have one question in the chat. Can you see it?
Sure. Can we get an SMS if triggered? So not at the moment. So currently the tripwires are an alert, either like I say, into our product or via webhook into a SIM. Now that's not to say if you were to do a webhook integration to a third-party system that could also send an SMS, but currently no SMS gateway integration to get it via text.
And mail?
And mail, yes. So you will also, you will get this by email. Great. So moving into insights. Oh, bear with me one moment. So one thing I have to apologize for is this is demo data rather than real life data, but it's a good way of being able to highlight and understand exactly what our governance, risk and compliance module now looks like. So as I mentioned, this is a way of moving from once in time pen testing, or maybe once a week, once a month, once a quarter pen testing, into continuous security validation and tracking. So insights is a way of being able to report to the organization that don't tell me that I'm secure, show me that I'm secure. And more importantly, taking it one step further, show me I'm becoming more secure over time. That is in essence the insights product. So up until now, we had the ability to do that point in time pen test and to compare two pen tests together to get a differential. This is taking this to a whole new step of comparing pen tests over 1, 3, 6, or even 12 months of data retention. Currently, some of the insights that you can gain out of the product, and this is, I should mention, has only been available for really about around 4 weeks, is the tracking of your weaknesses, first and foremost. So you can obviously customize this depending on how you're wanting to consume this data. So it could be by severity, criticality, such as critical, high, medium, low, or into by severity, or by weakness type, CVE, misconfiguration, security controls, compromised credentials. And again, how that changes over time. What we typically see is that when you initially deploy Horizon 3 and Insights, you get a huge spike, an increase in the discovery of weaknesses and impacts as you roll the product out. And then you get into that find, fix, verify loop, or maybe that purple teaming ethic, where those weaknesses should start to drop off. That is kind of what you see on screen here, is that drop off as you get into that purple teaming style ethic. Moving down, you can also consume that data via attack path. So that is actual exploitability rather than the individual weaknesses or modules. And again, how they change over time. So total open attack paths, as you can see, a 85% reduction over the course of a year. 72% in just host compromise or sensitive data exposure. Maybe you implement a new business email solution that is misconfigured and not doing what it should do, and you see a spike and an increase by 40%. It's a good way to understand at the time, what has potentially caused that, and we'll look at that at the systemic issues at the bottom. Now we're adding more and more abstract metrics into the governance, risk, and compliance. The first ones that we've added in is around remediation summaries. So first we've got number of open weaknesses by their severity, as seen previously. We can also then look at open weaknesses by age. This is again crucial when we look at that use case I mentioned previously, which is where you know all of your exploitability, you potentially suffer a breach, and it's that time that those weaknesses were open that was really the killer within the organization. So when were those weaknesses discovered, and how long have they been open for? Have they been open for over a year? Have they been open for 6 months or so? And obviously you can track those by severity. As you can see here, as critical weakness, one of them has been open for over a year. That is there when you can start to maneuver resources within your environment to get these fixed, to reduce those weaknesses by age. And then into really more abstract SOC metrics or SOC style metrics, which is mean time to remediation. We will be adding more and more remediation, we will be adding more and more abstract governance, risk, and compliance metrics into the product over the coming 3 and 6 months. One thing to talk about briefly is that will also include the likes of framework mappings. I can't speak about too much of it today, but there is a lot around frameworks that we get a lot of requests from our customers, and it's something we're actively working on in terms of being able to use offensive cyber information to understand how you map against some of the more major compliance frameworks available out there. Now, the next thing is then looking into your perspectives. Now, perspectives is not just running a once-in-time pen test from one location. It's about running pen tests from different locations. We all know that not everyone just has that one office network in one central location. You could have an Azure environment, a cloud, a GCP environment, Kubernetes environment, demilitarized zone, 3 or 4 different office spaces. This is where you can now start to understand your risks and your weaknesses by deploying virtual machines in multiple geographical locations. So yes, it's great to get a 10,000-foot view of the organization and your overall risk and your overall attack paths and weaknesses, but what does that look like on your cloud migration journey? Or what does that look like as you open up new office spaces or do mergers and acquisitions or start to integrate into your supply chain? This is where you can then start to pull all of these previous metrics we've shown up here, but on a per perspective basis. What does that look like in my Azure environment? What does that look like in my Kubernetes environment or my new merger and acquisition? And also, how are our systemic issues changing over time? We may, 6 months ago, had a huge credential problem because we didn't have multi-factor authentication enabled. We had lots of breached passwords in breach databases. We've worked tirelessly to get that fixed. How do those systemic issues change? And how do you report those to the board to get the relevant budgets for the relevant tooling to be able to fix those true systemic issues? such as multi-factor authentication technologies or new endpoint detection and response tooling, or a new potential vulnerability management solution. The final thing that I wanted to show is also the recommended actions. So the ability to, based on your systemic issues, make those recommendations either at an operator or a functional level, or at a management or a non-functional level to actually, again, implement the relevant policies and procedures to remove those systemic issues out of your environment. So that is the NodeZero Insights, our first entry into governance, risk, and compliance. And again, watch this space as this will continually evolve over the coming months. Finally, I want to talk about our rapid response service. This is something that, as far as we're aware, we're the only organization truly able to achieve based on both our expertise at a nation state offensive cyber level, but also based on the architecture of the tooling that we've built over the last 6 years or so. So moving into rapid response. As I mentioned right at the very beginning, rapid response is our way of providing you as customers, or you as you to your organization, a way to protect against zero-day and emergent end-day threats as they appear on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis. So going back to our founding team and our research and labs team have a whole host of different functions in terms of maintaining our product. They create all of the new attack content that goes into our product and is released again on a weekly basis. For those of you that want to keep up to date with the latest attack content being pushed into the product, you can click on the notification bell at the top here and subscribe to email updates. And you'll see here our releases as we release new features, new functionality, as well as new attack content around credential testing or Git repo handling, critical exploitable vulnerabilities, and so on. So for the latest news and information, I strongly recommend you subscribe here. So not only did they maintain all of the tools and add all of the new attack content into the back end of the system, they are also responsible for maintaining our rapid response service. And there are 3 different approaches to rapid response. And you'll see this as you go through some of these line items. First and foremost, as exploit analysts and research analysts, they will monitor the CISA KEV database and the CISA KERK database. For those of you that aren't familiar, the KEV database is a database maintained by CISA in the US for known exploitable vulnerabilities. These are vulnerabilities from the CVE database that are known to have exploit kits available out in the wild. So they maintain and monitor that list, as well as the KERK list, which is known use in ransomware campaign list. And if you find any vulnerabilities in your environment, you can see that actually through the weaknesses page of whether they sit on one of those 2 lists. They will monitor that list, and as new KEVs are added to that list, they will take those exploit kits, reverse engineer them to make them safe to run in a production environment, and then push them into the product. You can then run rapid response tests against those to get an understanding of whether they could impact you in any way. The second approach is to also monitor known repositories, either from research groups or more nefarious sources, for emergent exploit code or emergent POC code of exploits that are coming online. So this is looking at Git repositories and other types of repositories for research groups and others that are starting to work on exploit kits for specific vulnerabilities. We will take those proof of concept code, reverse engineer it to make it safe to run in production, and then push it into the product. Those 2 processes are our end day protection. That is allowing you very quickly after a known exploit being made available, whether you are subject to that or not. But what we really want to get to is moving into true proactive 0-day protection. And this is the real value of our research team and our rapid response center. Now, I'm an ex-Fortinet engineer. I actually worked at Fortinet when this came out, so I know this from the other side of the house. So I love to pick on Fortinet as an example here. So let me talk you through a 0-day timeline and what we, again, are releasing into the product on a weekly basis. So our research team will sit and monitor vendor advisories from all of the major vendor and manufacturers. Microsoft, Beyond Trust, Fortinet, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Avanti, you name it, we monitor those advisories. What we will do is we will monitor and assess those advisories to see whether we can create our own exploit kits before anything is actively and publicly made available. So I'll talk you through this timeline. Fortinet released an advisory on the 12th of March of last year. There was a potential SQL injection vulnerability in their endpoint management server or in their EMS service. We did an assessment within 24 hours of that advisory being released, so by the 13th. And within 2 days, within 48 hours, we had not only done an assessment, but created our own exploit kit, safe to run in production, and pushed it out into the product. What this allows us to do, or more importantly, allows you to do as a customer, is to then run a rapid response test using that exploit kit against your environment. This is going to give you, within the course of 20-30 minutes or so, an understanding of, do you have that vulnerability within your environment? Can you get to that vulnerability? Are the attack chains there, the misconfigurations, the weak credentials, the weak infrastructure to get to that vulnerability? And is that vulnerability actively exploitable? I.e., is your endpoint detection and response actually doing its job and blocking that from being exploited? You get a very quick response to say yes or no. We give customers typically 5 to 7 days to be able to run those rapid response tests. And then we will safely and publicly disclose that we have created an exploit kit for that advisory. That's at that point, CISA will add it to their known exploit vulnerability list. It breaks the news, and everyone else starts running around like an IT outage, trying to understand whether they are publicly exploitable to that vulnerability. So this is a way of using true offensive cyber to be proactive and provide protection to you as an organization to do that find, fix, and verify loop, maybe before this exploit is even publicly known to the wider security world. One final thing I wanted to talk about with rapid response, in our European point of presence, it is off by default, but you do have the option to opt in and allow us to monitor your metadata. So if you don't want to do that for any data privacy reasons, as an example, that's absolutely fine, and it is off by default. So all you would do is come into here and run your tests manually, or as you receive those notification emails that there's a new rapid response test, come into the product and kind of retrospectively run those tests as and when you get those notifications. If you want to be more proactive, you can have the ability to allow us to monitor metadata to understand whether you have Palo Alto, Fortinet, Avanti, whatever it may be in your environment, and actually send you an alert to say, hey, we've released a new rapid response based on, and it's not PII data, it's just metadata, but based on the data that we have on you, we believe you are potentially subject to this vulnerability. You should run a rapid response test now. So if, again, you wanted to move to that more proactive way of working, you do have the ability to automate that process and allow for proactive notification of running these tests rather than, let's say, more of a reactive approach. As you can see, we release these rapid response tests all the time, usually on a weekly basis. You see Beyond Trust here, Mitel, Sitecore, Palo Alto, Avanti, Apache, so on and so forth. I know and I understand that is a lot to take in a short period of time, but really they're the three key features and functions that we've released over the last, I'd say, 4 months at Horizon 3. What I'd like to do is, really that's everything from my side, is take questions if you have any additional questions. I can see one in the chat, but yeah, thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, there's another question in the chat about insights.
Wonderful. So just to run through, our management team wants to know how to perform security-wise compared to other companies in the industry. Okay, so to answer the first part of that question, the ability to be able to compare based on industry segment. So the short answer is no, that is not available in the product today, as in to be able to compare your size of organization or the vertical that you're in to other types within your organization. I can't speak too much to roadmap. It is something that our product management team and we at Horizon 3 are acutely aware of, and it does lead naturally to where Insights is going from a development standpoint. So short answer is no, it's not available to compare yourself to other Horizon 3 potential customers to understand how you're doing security-wise today, but that's not to say that it may not come in the not-so-distant future. In the phishing and educational learning platform for our users, we see behavior risk. Okay, so yeah, behavior risk score is again another really great abstract metric. The way that we're moving with Insights is to go into that kind of scorecard type of product, in essence. Obviously, we're just doing the first iteration into Insights. There will be, like I say, more abstract style scoring coming in the not so distant future. What I will do is I'll go away and take a note of behavioral risk score as one of the ones, because we are looking to actually solicit CISOs and security management to understand what the field wants in terms of other types of reporting. Frameworks were the first major ones that were raised to us: ISO 27001, NIST, DORA, so on and so forth. But I will definitely feed back that behavior risk is another one that we'd like to see in the product.
So AJ, I don't know if there are more questions. Please raise your hands if you want to, or again, put it in the chat. But AJ, thank you so much already for all your effort. It was great information. Hopefully we can also share the presentation with everyone. I switch back to Dutch for a moment and then come back to you. Dus even in het Nederlands. Ik zie op dit moment niet meer vragen voorbij komen. Wat we doen is dat we alle nieuwste ontwikkelingen die hier zijn rondom Rapid Response, TripWires, Insights met jullie zullen delen via onze nieuwsbrief. Ja, daarnaast proberen we eigenlijk iedere maand dit jaar een event te organiseren. Bijvoorbeeld een webinar om de doorontwikkelingen te presenteren. Want zoals je ziet is dit eigenlijk pas de start van deze functionaliteiten. Mocht het nou zijn dat jullie vragen hebben hierna, na deze sessie. Nou, jullie kunnen mij mailen, jullie kunnen mijn collega's mailen. De e-mailadressen zijn bekend. Daarnaast, mocht het zijn dat je de opname ook graag zou willen ontvangen, dan kun je dat ook naar mij mailen. Dat kan via m.groot@netbos.nl. En als er geen verdere vragen zijn, dan wil ik jullie bedanken voor jullie tijd en interesse. Hopelijk heeft het iets bijgedragen en kunnen jullie nog een stap verder gaan met het gebruik van NodeZero. En hopelijk kunnen we jullie de volgende keer weer zien tijdens een volgende event. AJ, thank you so much again for your time and all the information. And I hope to see you soon in another webinar.
Yeah, thank you for everyone's time. Good to speak to you all, and look forward to speaking to you all again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.